Hey, what up YouTube? Today on my RC channel, we're going to do some work on this RC four-wheel drive trail crawler 2. I'm going to be installing the superlift lift blocks, a 35 kg servo from Amazon, the delrin transfer case mount, and the XVD shafts for the front end. If you happen to catch my last episode, RC four-wheel drive Trail Finder 2 versus the Red Cat Racing Gen 8 crawlers, you already got to see these red leaf springs and TerraFlex shackle and Z-Link kit in action, giving this truck Mondo Flex over its original leaf spring setup for the rocks. I've also removed the internal springs out of the shocks. I was also running this truck on 3S with a battery mounted forward and put an 8-tooth pinion on the 45-turn brushed motor. This ready-to-run truck from RC four-wheel drive comes with an ESC that's actually quite smooth, and when coupled with a 9-tooth pinion gear, makes for a linear setup that's not overly punchy but is still very responsive. I took ground clearance measurements directly under the transfer case mount before and after the swap and found that the new delrin transfer case mount gave me about 3 additional millimeters of clearance. The biggest difference is that the new transfer case mount bolted up through the bottom of it into the bottom of the chassis rails, and the old transfer case mount shared screws with the rearward body posts, so those had to come out to actually remove that transfer case mount. I installed the new transfer case mount with 3mm stainless steel button head screws. Here's a comparison of the two mounts next to each other. Don't forget to always use medium Loctite on any screws going into metal to eliminate the chances of them backing out on the trail. On a scale of 1 to 5, I would land this transfer case swap project a number 2 because you do have to remove parts from the truck and it requires a little bit of forethought because the parts don't come with any instructions. Luckily, the simple nature of the RC four-wheel drive crawlers makes this pretty easy to figure out and very straightforward. I installed the superlift lift blocks off screen, however it turned out to be the most complicated project out of the list today because it required different length screws than stock, and it required spacing out the steering linkage to make sure it didn't bind with the leaf spring suspension. Without spacers underneath the links, there's no way this superlift lift block kit would function. So you actually need parts other than what are provided with the kit for a complete installation. After installing that transfer case mount, I removed the front axle to install the XVD CVD kit in this Yoda 2 cast front axle. I didn't know that you didn't have to take the axle out to actually do that installation. If you were to take the wheels off and then the 2 screws out of the knuckles, the entire stock assembly just drops out of those parts, and you slide the new axle into the housing where it has a square lug that engages the differential, and the outdrive is attached, so you just slide the knuckle right over that. But be careful, the bushings for the steering in the knuckle were apt to fall out. After installing the XVD axles, it really does give you quite a bit more steering in the front. However, the steering linkage where it bolts to the knuckle tends to bind onto the shock, so a little bit of creative shimming there kind of helps that out, but won't 100% eliminate it. After installing the XVD axle kit, I decided to install the 35 kg torque servo from Amazon and found it to actually be a little bit weaker than the stock servo, so I believe it to be a little bit overrated, and or the RC four-wheel drive servo is actually underrated. You do end up having to shave the gusset off of the top of the ears for the servo flush, and then everything kind of just bolted up like stock after that. I installed the original ESC back into this truck just with double-sided sticky tape on top of the servo so that I could move a little bit more weight up front and make more room inside this truck for a later project, the wireless light controller from RC four-wheel drive and the winch controller from RC four-wheel drive. After that, all it was required was for me to tidy up the wires a little bit and put the body back on. All said and done, it looks like I get about 2 3/4 to maybe possibly a tiny bit more of articulation out of this truck. The lift blocks do seem to give the axle a little bit more leverage on the springs, making it just a tiny bit more flexible, but it should clear obstacles much easier with the extra height. It is actually right back at stock ride height now. Alright guys, thanks for watching this episode. Don't forget to hit that bell because in the next couple of episodes I'm going to be installing the LED lights in this Red Cat Racing Gen 8 crawler for my fiance Amber BB.